Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Stuff Podcast. My name is David,
And I'm Carl.
and this is where we talk all things Star Wars. And for this episode, we are going to talk not episode 6, but actually episode 7 breakdown and Easter eggs. I know it's kind of mistitled there, but it is very late in the United States. Carl was just saying that probably like our friends in the UK and Australia are probably watching us right now, not so much our American buddies. So yeah, Bender is in the chat. Bender is across the pond. So yeah, it's super late for us right now, Bender. So bear with us. Yeah, we had a lot of events happen this weekend, so we haven't been able to podcast up until now. So
Well, I just barely got my voice back, so.
yeah, different events happened. We were just unavailable to and unable to podcast. So we're coming back to you here, and yeah, we're gonna go over episode 7, which is entitled "Choice," which is Bender says, "What do you mean across the pond? Aren't you in the UK? I thought, Bender." Maybe he's not familiar with that reference, but that's what Americans say for people that are in England or in the UK or Europe or just overseas, essentially. So yeah, we are going to talk about episode 7, Choice. So Bender, okay, where are you located then, Bender? Are you in Canada? Are you in? We're going off on a tangent here, but we need to find out where Bender's at. And why are you up so late, Bender?
Yeah, for real, man.
What time zone are you in? Bender's slowly typing right now. So yeah, we're gonna go over. So he says, yeah, he's up north. Okay, so episode 7, Choice. I like that title because there was actually an old video that was on the internet during episode 2 called Choices, and I think it was narrated by different people. They took different pieces of dialogue from the films, and I think in captions there was other stuff in there, but there was a lot of George Lucas influence in there, and I believe, I'm not sure if he spoke. It's been so long ago, but I mean, there were like stills, and they showed Jango Fett, and they showed the Jedi, and it talked about choices. So okay, so Bender is, I guess Bender might be in Vancouver. It's 11:36 where he's at. So yeah, I like the fact that I always say now that Star Wars is like a mirror to our reality, our Earth, and that yeah, your life is dependent on the choices you make. So in this episode, we do see a choice, and we see the indirect consequences, I guess you can say, from Osha's choice, and then the direct consequences of Torben's choice that ultimately led him to the Bearish Vow, and Soul's choice, which ultimately led him into the lives and the destiny of the twins. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to bring it up on the screen here if you're watching us on video. We're not streaming on Twitter tonight because it looks like they've said we need a premium account to do that. So we're not going to get a lot of viewers for that. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to watch it every 10 second by 10 seconds. So if there's more than just Bender in the chat, feel free to type in your comments, your theories, your suggestions. So here we go. And I think this is just the recap at the beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the penultimate episode. So the next to last. And yeah, I definitely want to go back here. So this is Brendok, 16 years earlier. We do see the structure out there, which I know people have said, like on The Mandalorian, they see those stone structures, and I think it's been dubbed Forcehenge by people. And yeah, we see another one of those structures like we saw in Tython in The Mandalorian here. And we get our group of 4 Jedi, 3 Masters, and a Padawan, which is Torben. Torben is Indara's Padawan, played by Carrie Ann Moss. And it looks like they're kind of looking at the flora here of the planet of Brendok and collecting samples, and they let us know a little bit later why they're doing this. And yeah, they got their Jedi iPads out and collecting samples in boxes. Looks like they're getting readings too from stuff. But also, it looked like if I can get to the right scene there, you can see Kelnaka in the back. If I just play it a little bit, you can see he's holding what looks like to be a metal detector, which is kind of wild. I never thought I'd see a Wookiee hold something that looks like a metal detector, but yeah, here we are. So yeah, it's just basically like a mission that the Jedi are on that, I mean, you would assume that Jedi could kind of go in, but I don't think we've ever really seen a group of Jedi like this. It's usually a master and Padawan there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've never seen like a science expedition.
Right, right. So yeah, you could see Torben, he's totally just kind of over the mission here. And we get a Jedi campfire. And we get a Wookiee as the cook. And we've kind of seen a similar situation like this before in The Last Jedi with Chewbacca cooking a porg. But this time it's Kelnaka cooking a creature known as a Nuna. I think we've seen those creatures before. They're kind of like, almost like turkeys in a way. But they're wingless and they just have legs. And they kind of
It's
just...
more like a kiwi then.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they talk about their mission around the campfire here as they're eating. And this is, of course, 16 years earlier from previous events when the twins were just little girls. And they essentially talk about how noble this mission is. And there's a master and Padawan conversation between Andara and Torben. Torben just wants to go back home to Coruscant. And Andara basically says, don't center yourself on your anxieties. Be careful of that. And we've heard that before in the Phantom Menace, of course, between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And yeah, Torben's just acting like a kid. And the mention of a Vergence comes up, which we also heard in episode 1. And the Vergence is explained as a high concentration of the Force. And Sol explains that they're on a mission to locate it, to kind of pinpoint where it's at. And that's why they're going through all the vegetation there and trying to locate it, essentially. And yeah, Dara gives the explanation. Concentration of force energy centered around a location.
Right. Now they do more or less refer back to the hyperspace disaster as described in Light of the Jedi, which I thought was a kind of a cool drop that happened 130 years before.
Yeah, we could barely hear you there, Carl.
Oh, sorry, my bad. What I was saying is, I like the mention of the hyperspace disaster, which is in
Right.
Light of the Jedi.
Right. That was like the big event. I guess spoiler for Light of the Jedi, the novel, but yeah.
Oh, it's been out
hyperspace.
long enough. If you were gonna read it, you probably have by now. Or if you weren't gonna read it, then okay, here's some clip notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that doesn't necessarily mean that Braddock is in that same sector, but it of course could mean that. There were a couple of pieces of debris out of that hyperspace disaster that got flung into other sectors.
Right.
Yeah. What they don't make clear though is, okay, so was there life on this planet, and something changed it, or was there nothing here and then the disaster happens and then all of a sudden there's life here? I thought that was a little unclear.
Yeah, we know that it was lifeless, and then they showed up because there's a virgins and there's life all of a
Yep.
sudden. So
Like I said, I think it would have been cool if they had actually mentioned that this planet is actually in the Hetzal system, which is where that whole disaster
yeah,
takes place. But they don't specifically say that. I guess it's kind of hinted at that it might be there.
yep. And Soul explains, yes, the virgins could create life like we see on this planet. So they are on a mission, and he explains it's a power that should be studied. Nothing could be more important to the Jedi. So we kind of get the explanation that it's a noble mission, that they should be there. What they're doing is of great importance. Torben's not having it. Kelnok is just like, yeah, I'm going to cook my Nuna here and barbecue.
Looks delicious, by the way.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we see the speeders in the back.
They do sell that as a meal over at
Galaxy's Edge.
Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think in that case it's a roasted chicken.
Yeah, I think we've been there together actually, and we've dined at Galaxy's Edge, and I don't think we did. You have the Nuna? I know I've had the tip yip.
Yeah. I don't believe so. I don't think I've tried it, but I'm sure it's actually a roasted chicken.
Yeah, if anyone's listening and hasn't been to Galaxy's Edge or has been to Galaxy's Edge and hasn't eaten the food there, the themed named food, it's all really good. I can't really complain about anything. It was all.
I can complain about the price. That's about it.
Well, yeah, I mean the prices, yeah, but I mean it was so good. I mean, Carl and I went for May 4th, and it was a great trip, man. I still think about that sometimes, and I was like, wow, we had a lot of fun together. I mean, it was just me and you for the most part, and we went on rides and hung out and stayed at the resort. It was awesome. So back to the episode here. So yeah, we are back during the daytime. You see Indara with the Force iPad there, and they're still collecting samples. And there's an interaction here that is interesting, and I'm really loving these Jedi to Jedi interactions. And Dara says, essentially, tells Soul that they go back and forth about Torben's actions, and Dara is trying to not give Torben and spoon feed the answers to Torben, try to lead him to the answers, and Soul disagrees with that essentially, and Dara says that is why you don't have a Padawan and I do, and they kind of have a little bit of a lighthearted moment between the two there.
But by the way, one thing that and I think the guys over at Screen Crush pointed this out too. Those tablets that they're carrying, that's the same type of tablet that you can see in episode 1. Anakin's mom has one of those in her hand when they're watching the race. That's what they're watching the race on. Now, what Screen Crush got wrong, however,
Oh gosh,
they were saying that George Lucas kind of, created this iPad-like device, long before the iPad ever got created. While that's almost true, Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that's where that whole device actually stems from. Matter of fact, I believe Douglas Adams is getting paid by Apple for every iPad sold because he sued them over it. So, anyways,
wow,
unimportant side fact there.
yeah, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. So they kind of split up, and Soul's told meet us back at the camp, and we get a lot of speeder bike action here, and Soul's out here just kind of walking, and of course he comes across the Boonta tree, and I think he kind of gets curious because it's a really kind of unique shade of yellow, different from all the other vegetation there. And of course he hears the twins playing, and it's from, I believe, episode 3, when we see the twins gather under the tree. May tells Osha, if I lose you, I always know where to find you at this tree. And we kind of get the Rashomon effect here. We see the same scene from a different point of view, from a different character.
Right. There are actually slight differences in the scene. Like if you actually pay close attention and compare it to the initial scene,
Yeah.
and we're actually about to see one of the major ones here.
Yeah. And here they recite the poem, always one, but born as two. We'll learn a little bit more about that later on in the episode here. And yeah, we just have Soul kind of sneaking around, kind of observing what's going on. And of course, he instantly builds an attachment to the girls, and in particular Osha. And he's just observing. He observes Mother Coral come and pick him up.
Right now, this is actually one of the things that's different from episode 1, because when Coral comes in episode 1, she's actually very nice to them. In this version, she's downright abusive.
Right, which kind of builds the case against the girl staying in Soul's head.
Right. So we're seeing Soul's interpretation where she,
right.
She was abusive when she really wasn't, because she kind of grabs him by the arm and is a lot more forceful with him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And Soul gets on his communicator. It's not a chic women's razor, but contacts Indara and explains to her what he's seen. And they get back to their, I don't know, mining colony, makeshift like witch coven lair in a mining colony. And there's a big keypad there. And
by the way, it's Torben that points that out, that whole mining
yes.
part.
Yes.
And it's interesting because they make mention of where he's from, which is the mining planet. So it's something that he would actually know.
Right.
Just visually. So apparently this is like a former mine shaft.
Yeah. And Soul is still snooping around, sees the way to get in there. And a lot of people are having issues with this, with Soul scaling the wall. And do you have an issue with this? I don't. I mean, it's not straight up and down. I mean,
right. I mean, if you look at the angle here, I mean, yeah, is it steep? Sure. Is he Jedi Master? Yep, sure is. And but even a normal human being could scale this. I mean, the latter part of the wall might be a little bit more of a problem, but that part that he's climbing on right there, I could do it, and I'm not all that agile these days anymore. So.
So yeah, more of the Rashomon. We get the different angle from the scene where the girls are there, and we see May being the more forthright user of the Force when Anastasia goes for the attack, and it's right here. And Soul witnesses this, and he's kind of freaked out. It's like, oh my gosh, it looks like the adult is attacking the child there.
Right, because he doesn't catch the entire interaction prior to that. So
right. And then there's some like Obi-Wan episode 4 style like noises in the deep back. And that's what it reminded me of. And Coral comes out to investigate, and she's automatically suspicious of everything. Seems like from the get-go. And then Soul is still snooping around, witnesses the Ascension ceremony here.
Or pre-Ascension ceremony.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the warm-up.
I don't know what the deal is with that hole. I don't know if they're going to explain that to us, because they certainly seem to be focusing on that. But why? No explanation given. I don't know if they just like holes or.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard some people make reference to the hole in the ground that Rey jumps through in Last Jedi.
Yeah. So yeah, Bender says, wait, David, you forgot to list off Patreon members. Yes, I did. I'll mention them at the end of the show, though, for sure, before we leave. But yeah. Going back to the episode here, yeah, it's basically a different viewpoint, a different angle. And Soul comes back and reports that there's a what was it? What was actually said? It was a force cult,
Right.
essentially.
He's
A force
essentially
cult.
Yeah, force cult. And then of course they say witches, and then Torben turns around and says Night Sisters. And no, it's not Night Sisters because this witch cult or force cult has children, and Night Sisters don't deal with children, apparently. So I guess that's the determining factor there.
now theoretically, I guess, they Coral could be a Night Sister that's just switched her allegiance, but
Yeah,
we don't know that. I mean, she at least she's from Dathomir, so
right, right. And of course, Soul says they do not treat the girls like children. He fears for the girls' safety, and Soul's just trying to build his case that we need to get these girls out of there. In particular, OSHA.
right. He's building that whole abusive,
Yeah,
home situation, which,
right,
as we saw in the other episodes, really isn't the case.
right. And they all go as a group. If Soul thinks it's better for them to approach it as a team of four, and they get to that opening that Soul saw, and Dara just tells Kalnaka just slice it, which is the term for hacking in Star Wars.
Right.
So
Now here's one thing that I find interesting. So we've seen in the Skywalker saga throughout, we've seen Jedi open locked doors with the Force. But these guys don't seem to be able to do that. Uh, I was just kind of wondering why about that for one, and two, it seems kind of weird that they're breaking and entering instead of knocking on the door.
yeah, that is a little odd.
I mean, why are you breaking in instead of actually, approaching this like somebody's home, like what it actually
Right,
is?
right. And in that episode 3, I think when we got that scene where we see the four of them inside of the witch's fortress here, it felt like they had an air of like, it's okay for us to be here because we're Jedi. We can go wherever we want, pretty much,
Right.
and you can't do anything about it. Essentially, kind of like going back to like police, cops. Cops can knock on your door, and if they have a warrant, I guess they can enter. And sometimes they don't have a warrant, and they still enter. And it's like, what are you gonna do? I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, again, though, it's just weird that to me. I
yeah,
mean, this is clearly one of those things that's kind of hinting again at the upcoming downfall of the Jedi Order. Because why would you
right,
do this way? I mean,
yeah,
surely there's a doorbell, right?
right. Well, I mean, it's a binding column. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, we're kind of going deep here
Yeah,
on
but I
what
mean,
their
like,
actions.
but like for example, Luke on the opens Jabba's palace door using the Force. Would they be able to just do the same thing, or was it knowledge that got acquired in the 100 years in between?
Right. And we go back to the scene where we get the witch coven just standing there with the kids behind them. And Dara does the introductions of Soul, Kanaka, and my Padawan Torben. And you can tell Torben, he is a little freaked out about the whole situation. Maybe scared even. And they address the witches that they thought the planet was uninhabited. And of course, we get the scene where we get to go inside the mind of Torben and see what he experienced when Anastasia kind of invaded his mind. And I like the fact that they did this. It's another different point of view here, like we've been getting this whole episode, but it's Anastasia talking and trying to almost like Leslie Headland has said in an interview she was fascinated with the word seduce when she was younger in Star Wars, and it seems like Anastasia is trying to seduce him into doing the non-Jedi thing and go with his needs instead of, or go with his wants instead of what the mission is calling for.
By the way, did you notice that she's actually in the scene twice in some shots, like right there?
Yeah, I noticed that her voice was echoing as well.
Right, like
Yeah,
if you listen to this on a good surround sound system, sometimes
yeah.
she's talking over your shoulder,
Oh wow,
but uh,
that's
uh
creepy.
but yeah, I mean you have on the right hand side you have her appearing there, but then she's also appearing right in front of Torben at times. In some shots, she's literally there twice.
Yeah. So yeah, you can also see their breath as well. So it's like a cold environment in his mind, which is kind of interesting.
Even though you can see the breath of the Jedi talking as well, so apparently it is cold on this planet.
Right, right.
Like earlier on, there's several times where you see the breath of the people talking. So apparently, it's not all that warm and
Yeah, you're a little far away from the mic right there.
cold. Oh, I mean,
And yeah, Anastasia just keeps on prodding at Torben in his mind, and of course, it almost seems like there was like a time dilation or something because the time she was in Torben's mind seemed like a lot longer than when they witnessed Torben basically get possessed and his eyes blackened.
now I was thinking about this. Do you think this is the reason why he ages faster? Because when you look at him yeah, in the early
Yeah.
episode, he looks significantly older than just 16 years ago. Yeah, because he's like what 20 something at best here.
Right.
So
So,
he'd be 36,
right.
maybe 40, and he looks like he's 60.
Well, okay. So I think with the acolyte, though, I know this is a lot. There's a lot of discussion about that. I think the acolyte does something very interesting, but unfortunately causes a lot of discourse online. It goes into the realms of okay, there are things that usually happen and things that don't usually happen. And I think a lot of the choices artistically, they've gone with situations that don't usually happen because it's like, okay, so like you explained that Torben would be 36. I had a friend that was like before his 30s, he went totally bald. So, I mean, there are situations where people do age faster than others. And I remember going to school with kids where they looked like adults and I was still a kid, like in the sixth, seventh grade, you know? I mean,
Right. No, and I get
yeah.
that part, but I mean, I think there may be a logical explanation for this because
Yeah. I mean, that could be a thing. And you get the piece of dialogue here. You cannot deny that the Jedi have the right to test potential Padawans. But then Indara says, but with your permission, of course. Which is like, what? That's like, we can be here all we want, but with your permission. It's like,
by the way, piece of dialogue is different in the initial version of this scene as well.
and this is after the ascension, so she's already got the markings on her head. And Anastasia says, yes, we will take our scouts and take the twins to you at midday. So they decide to leave. A conversation ensues on the bridge. They are about to test the girls. The classic Phantom Menace test, what we saw with young Anakin there. And Indara basically explains that kids are too old. They're too old to be Padawans. Of course, we've heard that before as well. So, there's a lot of Phantom Menace tie-ins here. And they talk about the marking on May's
Well, it's
forehead.
also Empire Strikes Back. I mean, Yoda says the same thing about Luke.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
that's where the Phantom Menace gets it from. Is from the Yoda statement from Empire.
Yeah, and there's another tie-in to, I believe, Empire here later on in the episode. And yeah, Sol just pleads his case with Indara that he thinks the kids are in trouble and wants to protect them. And
Does he seem a little desperate in that scene to you? Like, oh, I really want a Padawan. It's like he's almost throwing a tantrum about this. It seemed a
I
little.
think Soul sees this as like the perfect storm for him to finally get his Padawan. He found someone that he's connecting with. Um, he thinks he can make a huge difference. He thinks he sees the ultimate definitive truth, but as we see his viewpoint, it's not the entire. It's not the clearest of pictures of what's going on. And the thing that the acolyte does is it does this so well. I mean, it shows you what different experiences you can go through life, and this with this particular situation, yeah, if you're on the outside looking in, it looks totally different. It's the whole perception is reality type of scenario, and Soul sees a different perception that what really is, and it's going to cost him.
Uh, Now, one thing that I will also criticize is that I think this episode, where they give the explanation, needed to come much earlier. I don't because of the different the subtle differences in the scenes. If this had come earlier to where you're still kind of fresh in your mind, and I know we go through these episodes and go back to the initial episodes and kind of compare back and forth. Most people don't do that. So I think the fact that you have that Rashomon effect in this show completely lost on people because there's too much time gap, especially with these 30-minute episodes spread out over a week. People don't remember this stuff. It's just not
Right.
memorable enough, and so I think they kind of should have pulled this forward. And
Yeah, that's one of the struggles, I guess, with the TV show like this. I mean, some people might think, oh, they messed up, they didn't film it correctly or whatever, but every different viewpoint, the story's a little bit different, and
right.
it takes a little bit more effort. The, with the acolyte for sure to figure out exactly what's going on. It takes a little bit more homework if you want to do it as well, and to kind of figure out exactly what's going on. I think people will do it, and some people won't, and then they'll just criticize. So
Right. But I'm just saying, I think the confusion that a lot of people seem to be displaying online
yeah,
stems from the fact that it almost it is almost like they expect you to go back and compare to get
yeah,
full enjoyment out of the show, and 99.9% of the viewership is not going to do that.
yep. And Torben pulls out this device here, which is going to test May's M count. They don't say the M word; they just say M count. And we all know that's metachlorians. It's a metachlorian test, and straight through the sleeve of the shirt too.
Well, that's how the military does it. Like when they do their air pressure injection stuff.
You're far away again.
I'm not really that far away though.
Okay, well you're speaking low.
Maybe.
Okay, so yeah, we see another that's a very similar device to what we saw in the Phantom Menace when Mace Windu was holding up the screen and asking Anakin what they saw. And we get the same situation. What does Mace see? It's of course a Tuca cat, and she says something incorrect. And Indara and Soul know that she's just lying straight up so that she won't get chosen or whatever. And they kind of they kind of I don't want to say trick, but they kind of get May to kind of fess up about what's going on and kind of get her to open up about what is going on. And she talks about ascension, and we all know that's a ceremony that happens. And of course, it's already happened, and she got the marking on her forehead, and
It did get interrupted though, so I don't think the ceremony was actually successfully
right. I'm assuming that OSHA was supposed to get a marking too, but then yeah, the whole
right.
interruption happened.
I mean, do you think that what was actually going on was technically a sacrifice?
In a sense, maybe yes, because they were kind of sacrificing their way of living towards something, towards the thread or whatever. But the way that May words this to Soul here, everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. That sounds like killing, you know? It
Right, well,
doesn't
right.
sound
Well,
very nice.
and that's why what I mean. Do we think that technically, if that ritual had been completed, that they essentially would have more or less, sucked them dry for life force and kicked them in the hole, more or less. Uh,
I don't think so. Not from all the words and actions of the witch coven, because they specify that the kids are going to be eventual leaders of the coven. So, but I don't know if they kick them down the hole. Maybe something happens. They come back up. Maybe it's almost like a born again type scenario, like in
yeah,
like
yeah.
what
I
religions
mean,
have.
I would really like to know at the end of the day what that ceremony is all about, because, like
Yeah,
I said, we got to see a little chunk of it, but that's then the
yeah.
Jedi come in. So.
And then Soul says May was instructed to fail our test. And then I believe Soul asks take a different approach with Osha, and then Dara grants it. So they come at Osha at a totally different attitude and a totally different way of speaking to her, and I believe they get more information from Osha, and Osha's wanting to become a Jedi. She's wanting to go with them, and seems like that's her choice from the beginning. And Soul's just totally enamored with her. Soul is just totally fixated on bringing her back to Coruscant and making her his Padawan.
Right. Which I wish they would explain that a little bit better. I mean, I get that he sees something in her that apparently nobody else sees, but
Yeah,
the maybe we'll get that in the final episode, because
yeah,
we don't know where Soul went, so he could be you know explaining himself a little bit better in that final
yeah.
episode.
So yeah, they're back at their camp outside. It's dark, and Soul's still pleading his case. You can feel the twins aren't safe, and Dara tells Soul that we've intruded way too much. The witch coven has already made their decision, and we get a beep, I believe, and Torben gets back the blood test results, and here we get a big clue into some other aspects of the show, reasonings as to why certain things have taken place. So Torben says their symbionts are the same. And that's not something that usually happens even between identical twins. And that is basically an indication that they've been artificially created via the Force. That's the first conclusion they jump to. And that's essentially the truth, as we know, via
Right.
Anastasia. And of course, they tie it to the Vergence. The Vergence was manipulated to create, and in order to have the power to create. And then Torben, all of a sudden, just says, "Okay, well, that's our ticket home. Let's go get him." So he goes and jumps on his speeder. It's the proof of the Vergence. The girls are the proof. Let's go get them and get out of here. He wants to go back to Coruscant super badly. And we get a shot back at the Coven, at the mining colony, and we don't get the best speeder bike CGI here, but yeah, we see Soul speeding through the woods there, and then Osha is telling Anastasia she wants to be a Jedi, and I think Anastasia is already resigned to the fact that she's gonna have to give up Osha because she kind of respects her choice. She trusts her girls, and she can see that that's what's in her heart, and she's totally going to allow her to do it. And
Now,
Anastasia
what,
says, "I must discuss the situation with everyone."
right now, do you think that part of that may also be because that whole ascension ritual got interrupted, and maybe she's not really all that useful anymore?
Um,
Like for that overall plan. I mean, you don't actually know what that plan is, but or
yeah, I mean,
was.
there could be something to that, or it could be like Anastasia like, oh my gosh, the thread prevented this. Maybe kind of like how
Hmm.
Jedi's and other people talk about the will of the Force and kind of a things happen for a reason type scenario. I think that might play into it, but I think they could just do the certain. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the moon alignment or whatever, possibly, or that day, or I don't know. We
Right.
really
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's just simply not enough info
yeah,
given.
too many unknowns here. And Coral is with May, the two more aggressive of the witches there in the coven, and it's almost like a little like this scene is almost like Coral trying to get May hyped up about using the thread to defend and attack, and Coral actually says, "Get mad,"
Right.
and
So she's kind of dropping the whole Sith hint in a way there.
right,
Um, which kind of gives rise to my theory that we'll discuss at the end.
yeah, all the Zabraks are Sith in live action, but in video games are actually light side. It seems like to me.
Well, there's an option
Yeah.
Battlefront 2 had the option to put a Zabrak head on your light side character, but
And Anastasia here in the scene is in a council with the I guess the higher ranking witches in the coven. And the dialogue here is, you would sacrifice our future for the wish of a child. And Anastasia basically says, my children are our future. Her wish must be considered. Which I don't think is this isn't very common, the way the mother is acting with the child. This is very unorthodox, I think, in comparison to what we've seen in other shows and other stories. She's really giving Osha a choice here. And I think the coven here is frustrated. And someone points out, you're their mother, but you're also our leader. So Anastasia just blurts out, well, I'm acting as mother. And we go back to the same scene where May, I kind of skipped over it here, where May's at the control panel. Actually, she's at the outside of inside of the control panel, directly outside of the entrance, and she smashes it with like a piece of steel or something. And she just throws it down. And she proclaims no one can get in or out. And I think the witches are kind of viewing her at this point as almost like as someone that they're going to listen to. And Coral tells all the witches, arm yourselves. And it looks like the armament are bows and arrows, which is kind of interesting in Star Wars. We got that in Rise of Skywalker, but yeah.
well, the witches of Dathomir use bows and arrows as well.
Yeah. And we get the scene where May tells Osha, you can't go. We're stuck here now. Because due to the fact that you broke the control panel, Torben gets... Saul gets caught up to Torben here. They're going to scale the side of the mining colony. And Saul explains to them, you cannot let them get in your head. So Torben, I guess, in his training, figures out how to fortify his mind. And we see the old scene that we had before where May picks up the lantern. Interestingly enough, it has like two flames built into it and has her journal in the shape of a triangle. You see kind of the symbology there.
Well, it's a Jedi Order symbol.
Right. Like it's embossed into the paper, it looks like. It doesn't look like it's really drawn. It looks like it's kind of like stamped in there. And Osha says, I won't let it happen. May, please. She's stuck inside her room. And then a lot of people have issues with May kind of going a little psychotic here and throwing the flames down and like burning And of course, all the discourse online about the concrete burning, but we don't know how the chemicals react inside of that lantern. I mean, I know that might
Well,
be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean,
well, my thing is this. So she gets that lantern off the wall, right? It's
yeah,
like a sconce. So it clearly has to be fed by fuel from the wall.
right.
So, and maybe there's a quick disconnect there that allows you to take it off the wall and use it as like a portable light. But that still means that there's like a gas or whatever the energy source for this fire is.
Right, right. And it's
Uh,
leaking, yeah.
yeah, there's still a you know a connector of some kind, and so that could cause that. Now, I still don't actually fully buy that. I don't think she's the one that actually causes the explosion. I think that's Coral because we have that scene i- in the first is the first or second episode where Coral has standalone scene where she's in front of that reactor,
Hmm.
looking at it, looking over her shoulder, and then moving towards it. So I don't think OSHA caused the explosion at all. I don't think this fire
Okay.
caused the explosion.
Yeah, and here we get Kelnaka and Indara inside the cockpit of the ship. They followed because they didn't have speeders of their own, so they're hovering above the mining colony as well. Their ship's very unique. It almost looks like a manta ray almost from the bottom. And then we see Coral with her spear there, which yeah, taking a spear against a lightsaber. I don't know. And we get dialogue here. I told you we cannot use violence. And I told you I would die before I let the Jedi take my children. Soul's trying to basically bargain for the kids here. And of course, we see May set fire. We see Oshi go to the window, try to escape. And here, when you play it, you can actually kind of see a liquid on the ground, and that catches fire.
Right. So I'm assuming that's the liquid from inside the lamp. So
Right, right. But then the
it,
flames rise up to where the lamp was, where there is, we kind of hypothesize that there's like a fuel source in there, and
yeah, I mean
that
there
can
has to be
spread.
because
Yeah,
fire doesn't burn forever out of one small little canister. So
right, right.
there has to be a supply to that.
Yeah. Great critical thinking there, unlike a lot of people out there on the internet. So, okay, so the fire gets pretty big. It kind of engulfs that whole entry area. And then we get Sol and Torben back at the initial spot where they met the Coven. Witches are all in the, like the Skyway there, where they walk between, uh, I don't know, general areas inside the mining colony there. And we see NSA and Coral there, like almost in a standoff. And Sol tries to tell them, hey, we're not trespassing. We've come with noble intentions, even though, yeah, they are kind of trespassing.
Yeah, I mean he says that right after they climbed over the wall and broke into the joint for the third time. I,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that part is still very un-Jedi like to me. Like, okay, so the first time, okay, maybe you're being stealthy and you're just gathering info, but then you break open the door later, and now you're coming in here once again, climbing over the wall and confronting people, and essentially trying to steal the kids out of the fortress. I was like, that's just bizarre.
Yeah.
But
And Sol
but
asks the big question, the twins, where'd they come from? And of course, you get Coral looking around like, oh crap. Are we going to tell the truth here? Yeah, Sol asks how they were created. And of course, you hear the bowstrings creak, which is interesting. And Anastasia claps back, basically, someday these noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy. Which is true so many years later, over 100 years later, essentially. And of course, we get the whole explanation of like the hubris of the Jedi and the Last Jedi. And May comes back and talks about the fire. And in this scene, we get a slow motion scene of the lightsabers igniting, which is super cool. And then we kind of get to see a ability that Anastasia has, where she can, as well as May here, is turning into this black smoke, inky smoke type form, and Soul obviously sees this as aggression and takes out his lightsaber and just stabs Anastasia right
Yeah,
in the solar plexus.
I took the whole thing more as if you play Fallen Order. The Night Sisters have this teleporting ability. Only their smoke is green when they do it,
Right.
and I think that's what we're actually seeing. I think she's trying to teleport herself and May out of this situation.
Yes, Leslie Headland has explained that that's what was happening. She was trying to get out and teleporting May out of there as well. So, yeah,
Actually,
that is what's happening. And of course, Soul makes the mistake of putting that saber right in the middle of her body, essentially kind of severing her spine, most likely. And then, as Anastasia is dying, tells Soul that I was going to let Osha go with you. And Soul has immediate regret for what has happened, what he's done. You can see the marking clearly on May's forehead. She runs to Anastasia, which is her mother. And we see the old shot that we've seen of Osha climbing through the tunnel there. And then we see a really awesome scene of Torben with his lightsaber skills. Just fantastic little Anakin maneuver there. And of course, we see Coral attacking Soul with her spear. Soul just avoids every swing and just goes kind of through the motions of, yeah, she's not going to be able to do anything to him with this spear because Soul's way too skilled. And throughout the whole sequence, you can see his face. He's just defeated, sad, and is contemplating what he's done. And Coral gets some punches, some elbows, I believe, to the face, and Soul still doesn't fight back. And Coral wants him to desperately fight back, but it doesn't happen. And there's an explosion. So was that the explosion you were talking about earlier? From
right. I mean,
it could have been a timed explosion by Coral.
Right, it could have been a timed explosion by Coral, or this could be, the gas lines upstairs blowing up, but the generator that blows up is downstairs. So I don't know how that all fits together. You gotta figure that at the tech level that they're at, that they would know how to make a blowback valve that prevents fire. Like if if there's a fire in your house and you have a gas stove.
Yeah.
That doesn't make your entire house blow up.
Right.
Because there's blowback valves that prevent that.
So here we get to see Coral actually do the same thing that Anastasia did, turn into the black smoke. And she is talking to the Jedi, and the Jedi hear her. And she basically explains that you shouldn't have brought him. And they think she's talking about Torben, but no, she's talking about Kelnaka. So this is the stuff in marketing that we've seen where Kelnaka actually ignites his lightsaber and fights his fellow Jedi. In this scene here, we see all the witches in the coven with their eyes blackened. They're in some sort of trance and they're vocalizing here. What the exact technical explanation of what's going on here, we don't have. I haven't heard anything. But it seems like they're almost like connected with Coral and maybe.
Well, I mean, they're the ones controlling Talnaka. which is why what happens here in a second happens is they're the ones controlling him,
Yeah.
and apparently it takes a whole lot of them to control that Wookiee. But
Yeah. And I don't think we necessarily see how Torben's face gets all cut up, but he gets thrown around a lot.
they do show it, because he kind of slams him into the wall. See right there, and if you look at the wounds, the pattern on the wall and the wounds on his face, that pattern is what causes the wounds on his face, because it's the exact same thing. See how there's that coffered pattern on the wall that he got slammed into, and
Well, I mean,
getting slammed to a wall by a Wookiee, I would think would cause some lacerations.
well, I
At
mean,
the very
I would think his bones would get crushed too, more so than
Well,
just
I mean,
get cuts
and
like
the-
that.
well,
It almost seems like the cuts are from like something sharp, not something blunt. You know what I'm saying?
right. Some people were saying how kind of like apparently used his claws.
Yeah,
But
I heard that
but
explanation too, but I
that-
mean,
that
he doesn't
doesn't
have
make-
claws. He has fingernails.
well, he does have claws. Technically, all Wookiees do. You just can't really see them. Uh, but the thing with that is, I don't buy that, because that doesn't look like claw marks either. But if you look at it like under his eye, that's like a right angle. If you look at the wall, that's the pattern up there. So I just took it as
Okay.
that you get slammed into the wall hard enough to cause those injuries right there.
Yeah. And then Soul steps in, tries to remind Kelnaka not of his humanity, but of his, I don't know, how do you say Wookieanity? I don't know. Um, and they ensue with a fight, and of course Soul doesn't want to injure Kelnaka because he obviously knows he's kind of possessed there, and Soul's able to knock Kelnaka's lightsaber out of his hand using his unignited lightsaber, which is kind of cool. We've never seen that before. And then we get the classic Wookiee choking another person scene with the long hair around the neck, which automatically brings back visions of Lando getting choked out by Chewbacca and Bespin. Very fond memories there. And we see Indara jump into action and jumps on Kelnaka, takes him to the ground, uses the Force to exorcise the witches from his mind. And she actually does achieve it. The witches all collapse, and they're just laying there on the ground. To what extent these witches got knocked out, got hurt, got killed, we don't know. That's another one of those things in this particular episode. We just don't know the precise thing that happened.
I mean, they kind of implied death, but at the same time, like, why would that kill them?
Yeah.
I mean, she's not. I mean, she's breaking the link. If breaking the link kills you instantaneously, that seems kind of not worthwhile strategy for attack to possess somebody if it's going to kill you if the link gets broken.
So then we get another very controversial scene. The fact that Soul shows up and he's trying to force hold up the kids on the bridge. And we've seen the scene before. There's a bridge that's split. You have Osha on one side, May on the other. And stuff is crumbling. And Soul's essentially holding up the bridges, or the bridge that's cut in half. And he decides to make a choice and decides to focus all of his power and attention on Osha. And May falls down.
Now, in the initial scene that we got of this, he's not even there at all. So my question is, which point of view is that initial scene? Like from episode 1 or 2, whichever one it is. Because is that OSHA's point of view that Soul never even bothered to try to save her,
Hmm.
or or is it May's point of view, or is it somebody else's point of view entirely? Or that
Yeah.
it seems a little vague there because clearly it's somebody who thinks that Soul didn't try to save anybody.
Right.
Soul, who's actually telling this version of the events, is saying he tried to save them both, but then had to make a choice, and he chooses the one he likes better.
Right.
Is kind of what you do.
Yeah, his preference was OSHA, and if you can't save them both, and you can only save one, of course he's going to save OSHA. So he jumps down, reaches down, gets her by the hand. He's out of force power. And then we go back to the scene we saw previously, where OSHA is unconscious / asleep with that I don't know, CPAP device on her face. And
By the way, why did she even require that? I mean, she was fine. She didn't get injured.
uh, maybe it's a precautionary. I mean, when they
Yeah,
put you in a
yeah,
hospital, they give you oxygen.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And yeah, we see Kelnaka just kind of recovering from the chaotic situation there, and you see Torben's face. He's just kind of mangled, and apparently he loses his eye from this. So it's a sad situation for him. We all know what his end is. And then we see Solon and Dara get into like a little spat.
Master! Master!
And then they kind of come to their senses about everything. And I think it's interesting that we've always seen Sol with gloves on. I don't think we've ever seen his hands.
Yeah, I don't think I recall a scene where he's not wearing his little gauntlets because they're not just gloves; they're actually armored.
Yeah,
Actually,
there's armor on them.
Um, we may actually see his hands when he's at the Jedi Academy because I'm not sure that he's wearing those gauntlets there.
Yeah. And I believe Torben asked the question, what are we going to tell the council? And she just says, we are going to tell them the truth. May burned down the witch's fortress and everyone was lost. And that's kind of the truth from a certain point of view.
Well, it may be her version of the truth.
Right.
She may actually believe that that's what happened.
Right.
Now, also, she didn't get to see a lot of it, so this could also just be based on what Soul kind of filled her in, because she doesn't get there until Kalnaka gets into the fight, and she goes and breaks the
Right.
bond. So she didn't actually get to see the cause of the fire or May coming down there and saying, "Hey, there's a fire." She doesn't get to see any of that. So you would have to think that it's a third-hand account that makes her think that is what happened.
Yeah. And Sol just tells Indara he must face the council. And Indara says, why would you do that to her? And after everything, this little girl is lost tonight. So she kind of wants to protect OSHA in a way. And it never happens. They never go in front of the council and tell them everything before they can, maybe reason out what to really do and to figure out what course of action they should take. OSHA wakes up and kind of breaks up that conversation. And she simply asks Sol what happened. And somber music plays. And we get the credits.
But by the way, with Torben's injuries, I mean, we don't know if back to tanks are a new invention for from 100 years later, but you would kind of think that something similar to that, if not the exact same thing, already exists at this point.
Yeah, I believe Bacta was invented I read it in a book, actually. It might have been The Light of the Jedi. Was it The Light of the Jedi, or was it a different book? Maybe it was a Claudia Gray novel. But it was invented. Man, if someone's in the chat, they can answer that question.
Yeah, I don't actually recall, but my thing is, don't you think that they would have a back to tank on that ship?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, reasoning, yeah, you would think, but and also the other different and interesting thing, there's a song played during the credits where someone's actually singing.
Which I thought was just weird.
Yeah, it was a little out of place. I don't understand. I mean,
I mean,
it's emotional, the episode and everything, but I mean,
yeah,
typically we've heard stuff like that, like the Book of Boba Fett show. The song choice was different at the end, but that was the finale.
yeah, but it wasn't even really a song. It was more of a chanting kind of thing.
Right, right.
This is actually like song. I don't
It was
know.
almost like a Disney thing, almost. It seemed like.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just like it's completely out of place to me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. I
I
don't
mean,
think
if this came after the season finale, it would be a little bit more in place, you know.
Right, right, exactly.
But after episode 7, I mean, there's still one more episode to go. Why is this here?
Yeah.
So I don't know if if they're just hooking somebody up. You know, hey, let's go. Good job
Yeah.
writing this song. We're gonna go ahead and put it in there just for you.
Yeah.
To
So yeah,
boost your
that
career.
that's the episode. I liked it for the most part. We don't have too many issues with it, but of course, I think you're going to see all the discourse online just highlighting stuff that can be easily explained if you stop, think, use a little bit of critical thinking, like we did on this podcast. I think you can kind of reason with some of the choices in there, and of course, it's only a 30-minute TV show, so that's the other thing too. I mean, they really can't go super in depth. And even in the films, they don't go super in depth, but there's always the ancillary material that you can get, like the books and the comics and the novels that will kind of explain certain things, and you get the science of it all. But then again, the saying is you don't put logic, science, and reason in some of these Star Wars stories. And George Lucas has said that these stories are meant to be like campfire stories. Every time a different person tells them, stuff changes. It's a little bit different. So don't take it with don't take these stories into too literal and very exacting type of tellings. Because
Yeah, it's not Star
it's
Trek, it's Star Wars.
right, right. So, all right. So, what do you rate this show with this particular episode 7?
I wasn't quite happy with this episode. I'll be honest. I still like it, so I'll probably put it in the 5-6 category. But I was very mediocre on this one because there are just some actions that are taken, like for example, the break-in and entry part for a Jedi seems a little out of place.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't have certain skills that have been common throughout the Skywalker saga, like the ability to open locked doors if I use it through using the Force. I mean, if Luke could figure it out and doesn't even have any proper training, then you would think that somebody who went through the Jedi Academy knows how to do that. Where you don't have to bring a slicing device to slice a door open. It seemed out of place. It seemed like somebody didn't quite do their homework on that one, unfortunately. Yeah, there's just a couple of inconsistencies. Now, is it huge stuff that's absolute game changing? No, it's not. It's just little nitpicks. I kind of wish we would have gotten more answers this episode because we only have one episode left. They still need to explain the whole Chimera situation.
Right.
Which my theory on that is at this point, especially after seeing this episode where we now know Coral is still alive, but she didn't die. The rest of the witches magically died, whatever another part that I have a bit of a problem with. But
Yeah.
yeah, but so Coral teleports away. Now, Hymir has knowledge of this incident. The only person that's not one of the Jedi that makes it out alive, as far as we know, is Osha May and Coral. So since Hymir didn't get the information from May because he's the one telling her about this stuff. I mean, the logical explanation would be that he got the information from Coral, which would kind of indicate that maybe she's behind the whole thing. Which may also be the point of her kind of giving that get angry
Yeah.
hint. So I'm thinking she may be actually the master's master, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
I guess we'll find
Yeah,
out.
we will find out tomorrow night. So yeah, like Bender pointed out, we have to mention our top tier patrons. Starting off with Hayden Hauser, Darth Ace 1, Lee McCallion, Chris Simpson, Kevin Leininger, Deb McCaffrey, Drew Peters, Zach Netzel, Maya Morris, Maka Talantala, Adam Haber, and Brad Mackey. Thank you so much for all your awesome love and support podcast. And yeah, we didn't have time, our regular time to do this, to go over it, but I definitely did want to get it in before the very last episode of the Acolyte. So that is our Acolyte episode 7 breakdown and Easter egg podcast. If you're new to the channel, you can always find us on Instagram at Star Wars Stuff Pod, on Twitter at Stuff Pod, on Threads at Star Wars Stuff Podcast. Support us on Patreon, like so many others have, at Star Wars Stuff Podcast 2187. We're also on TikTok. You can email the podcast at starwarstuffpodcast@gmail. We're also on Facebook. We have a group and a page. And give us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify and write a review. It helps out the podcast. So for Carl, my name is David. And until Tuesday night, we're going to do a pre-show, a post-show, then of course a breakdown with all the Easter eggs with Carl. May the Force be with you.
Always.
Pew pew.